Ancient prophecies might seem distant from modern life, but what if I told you there's a biblical text that reads like a masterclass in accountability and consequences? The story of Ezekiel's razor carries some surprisingly relevant lessons about leadership and responsibility.
What really strikes me about this passage is how theatrical it is. A prophet shaving his head and beard in public would have been absolutely shocking for that time period.
Well, that's exactly what makes it so powerful. The text describes this incredibly precise ritual, where Ezekiel has to weigh the hair on scales and divide it into three exact portions. It's like performance art meets divine judgment.
Hmm. And each portion represents something specific, right? Could you break that down?
So here's the fascinating part. One third gets burned in the city during siege, another third falls to the sword in battle, and the final third scatters to the winds with, get this, a sword drawn after them. The mathematical precision makes it even more chilling.
That's exactly what I find so compelling, this combination of methodical planning and raw emotion.
You know what's really interesting? Jerusalem is described as being placed in the midst of the nations, like it's meant to be this shining example. But then, and here's where it gets wild, they actually become worse than the surrounding nations they were supposed to influence.
Well, that's quite the plot twist. It's like being given the corner office and then completely betraying the company's trust.
Right. And the consequences are absolutely devastating. We're talking about multiple layers of disaster. Famine so severe that, the text mentions cannibalism plus pestilence, wild beasts, and the sword. It's like every possible calamity is being unleashed.
The environmental aspects are particularly striking. It's almost like nature itself turns against them.
That's such a crucial point. In Genesis, humans are given dominion over animals. But here we see a complete reversal. Even the basic structures of civilization, like the staff of bread they depend on, get completely dismantled.
So, what do you make of that detail about preserving just a few hairs in the garment?
Well, it's one of those details that really stays with you. Even this tiny preserved remnant faces more trials. Some of those saved hairs end up in the fire, too. It's like watching hope itself being tested to its absolute limit.
The repeated phrase, I, the Lord, have spoken it, adds such weight to everything, too, like a divine signature on a terrible decree.
You know what makes this text so relevant today? It's dealing with these universal themes about how societies can corrupt themselves, how privilege brings responsibility, and how actions have consequences. Like the specific context might be ancient Jerusalem, but these principles about moral accountability and social corruption, they're timeless.
The mathematical precision at the beginning really sets up this idea that everything has a measure, a weight, a consequence.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful. The whole passage moves from this precise measuring of hair to these cosmic consequences, but maintains this sense of exact justice throughout. Even in describing chaos and destruction, there's this underlying order and purpose.
The whole thing really challenges our modern sensibilities about justice and mercy, doesn't it?
That's what makes it such a compelling piece of literature, even beyond its religious significance. Whether you're approaching it as a religious text or as literature, it forces you to grapple with these fundamental questions about justice, responsibility, and consequence. And in today's world, where we often struggle with questions of accountability and leadership, these ancient insights feel surprisingly relevant.
Well, it certainly gives us a lot to think about in terms of how we handle power and responsibility in our own lives.
And that's really the key takeaway here. While the imagery might be ancient and the consequences extreme, the core message about accountability and the relationship between actions and their results, that's something we're still wrestling with today. Whether in business, politics, or personal life, these principles of responsibility and consequence remain as relevant as ever.